Well, I know this is going up late, but I've been busy all day, and frankly, that's probably a blessing in disguise because it means I get to talk about this whole Breonna Taylor situation. Because we learned a lot of interesting things today, and now that it's a little later in the day, I can see a little bit of the way this is going to go reaction-wise. Not as good of a perspective as I'll have in the morning after I see what sort of damage there is. But so far, what we know is that there are no charges in the Breonna Taylor case. At first, they said, "Oh, an officer's getting charged." One of the three officers who were involved. But it's something that Steve Lookner was watching his stream realized pretty quickly. Actually, I think somebody super chatted it. If you look at the indictments, they have the initials of the victims, because it was the charge, first of all, was not murder. They didn't charge anybody with murder. They didn't charge anybody even with involuntary manslaughter. They charged him with wanton endangerment, which is essentially, reckless discharge of a weapon. Saying that, oh, well, he recklessly fired his gun off into a residence, which, that's something you should charge a cop for. Cops should not, recklessly discharge their weapon. But they didn't say that he did that in the Breonna Taylor case. There were three cases. Or he's charged, or no, not three cases. It was one case, but three charges because there were three people in the apartment. But it was not her apartment, apparently. It was a different apartment. And in the Breonna Taylor case, the prosecutor came out, and the prosecutor who I saw at the press conference was a black guy, and he was trying to make it clear, hey, we're not saying that this was a great situation and that this woman should have died. But all we're saying is that under the law, the way the law is written, there's nothing we can charge these cops with because they got a warrant. They executed the warrant. They were shot at. They fired back. It's as simple as that. There's nothing we can do. And so he's saying, hey, it's sad that this woman died, yeah, and, if you want to get justice for her, going out and burning buildings is not the way to do it. Mob justice is not justice. And I thought that the prosecutor here, who was speaking from the Attorney General's office, I don't think he was the Attorney General himself, because I don't think the Attorney General's a black guy. But whoever this guy was speaking at the press conference, I thought he gave a very good speech, explaining why they're not charging these cops with anything. I thought it was convincing, and I thought it was, genuine, saying that, hey, he doesn't think this is a good situation. He's not happy with the way things turned out, but, this is the way the law is written. And so essentially, if you want this sort of thing not to happen again, what you have to do is change the law. But of course, people are not going to understand the nuance of all that. People who want to riot are going to riot. And so immediately, people were visibly upset. There was a sort of a vigil gathered, I forget, is it Jefferson Square Park in Louisville, where they've been having a lot of the Breonna Taylor protests. And so people were very upset because they want these cops to be charged with murder, because they went in there with the intention to murder her, to kill her, and so they need to get first-degree homicide. That's what they should be charged with, which, of course, is nonsense. If they charge them with that, these cops would get off, which is what is probably going to happen in Minnesota, by the way. Those cops, they threw the book at them. They're probably going to get off. Kyle Rittenhouse, probably going to get off. And if this prosecutor just wanted to appease the mob, he would charge these folks, and then it would go to trial, and the jury would end up being the ones, who take all the blame. They would say, okay, well, it's a racist jury, and the prosecutor would go, well, I did everything I can. This prosecutor is not passing the buck. He is looking at the case and saying, you know what, if I bring this to trial, I'm not going to win. There's just no way. He has, the folks in Kentucky apparently have, a lot more gumption than the folks in Minnesota or Wisconsin. But the result is you have a lot of people upset. If this had happened, in the George Floyd case with those cops, we would have had a lot of unrest, following that announcement, too. And the same thing with Kyle Rittenhouse. So the prosecutors in those cases chose to charge these guys knowing that they would get off. And so they're essentially deferring the riots to a later date. In Kentucky, they decided, you know what, let's just let it all out now. These cops are getting off one way or the other, as the law is currently written. So let's just, get the riots over with. Now, from what I've seen so far, again, because it's still during the day, the sun has not set in Kentucky. You are seeing people, being very belligerent, walking throughout the streets. Of course, they're being very nasty to the cops, but you're not seeing the level of violence and destruction that we've seen in the other riots. Now, again, I think that's probably because it's still daytime. They are walking up to businesses and beating on things, but they're not smashing things to the point to where they're causing much damage in dollar terms. Like, I haven't seen any broken windows yet. I've seen them beat on windows, just like, kind of like, I don't know, animals just trying to smash things, but not breaking anything. They've gone up to restaurants that had outdoor seating and just knocked all the tables over for no reason. But I mean, they were they were metal outdoor dining tables. So I mean, could they get scratched up? Yeah. But are they destroyed? No, not really. There might be a couple of torn umbrellas, but it's nothing that's going to bankrupt the business. I saw one video from, I believe the guy on Twitter is BG on the Scene. He's one of these guys who goes around and embeds with the rioters and watches everything they're doing. They surrounded some guy outside of his business and were, banging on his windows and yelling at him, and probably telling him to, put his fist up in solidarity or whatever. And he said, go F off. Or maybe something else. Whatever he said, doesn't matter. If he does anything other than what he's told, they're going to be mad at him. The cops so far seem to be, they seemed like they were certainly prepared because they announced a couple days ago, hey, we're declaring a state of emergency before there's any announcements from the, from the AG. So pretty sure that the city of Louisville had a heads up from the state that there weren't going to be anybody charged with murder and that the mob was going to be angry ahead of the time. They've been moving in, National Guardsmen. The police, very quickly have been trying to corral these folks. They declared an unlawful assembly already, and it's still daytime. I believe there's a curfew in place, and really, what will be the test is to see what happens after curfew tonight. That's when things either will disperse and, turn into nothing, or things will get violent. Because the kinds of people who stay out during curfew, and I think there's been plenty of people who pointed this out. The reason why they declare curfews is not because they expect rioters to obey them, but so that they get all of the other, less violent elements out of there so that they don't serve as human shields for the rioters. The curfew gives the cops an extra degree of latitude because the idea is like, well, you're already essentially a lawbreaker for being outside to begin with. So, we're a little more justified in smacking you down. And so you declare a curfew as sort of a strategic thing if you're expecting there to be riots at night. So there's going to be people out. Now, these are not limited to Louisville, of course. This is a nationwide thing. I heard at least one other city, Detroit, is going to have a gathering at 7 p.m. Now, of course, I'm recording this at about 7:20 Eastern Time, and I believe Detroit is on Central Time. Yeah, they'd be Central, not Mountain Time. They're not that far west. And so in about 40 minutes, there's supposed to be a gathering in Detroit. We'll see how that goes. I'm surprised. We haven't really seen much in the way of riots in Detroit, and I'm surprised. Maybe that's because it's hard to racialize things in Detroit since there are so few white people to begin with. I mean, the white folks kind of, threw up their hands and left Detroit after the 1960s. They never really came back. So I guess, people in Detroit don't really feel like the white man is oppressing them. I don't know. I've never been to Detroit, but I mean, based on the demographics, they're like 80% black or something. I would imagine there aren't too many white people in positions of power in Detroit just by, looking at the percentage of the population. I don't know what they would do. So because this is so racialized, the policing thing, and it's all about white cops and white people and whiteness and stuff. Rather than being about police brutality, even if there are probably bad cops in Detroit, they might not be getting the same kind of backlash right now as cops throughout the rest of the country. But we'll see tonight. Who knows? Maybe Detroit will become a new hotspot. Only time will tell. I'll try and keep an eye on that and report back tomorrow on that to see if anything does end up going down there. But in Louisville, I think it's a pretty safe assumption that there's going to be some bad stuff today. I mean, people have been boarding up for probably the last week in Louisville, expecting things to get bad. Will be interesting to see what happens in Portland. I'm sure they're going to try and do some kind of solidarity thing in Portland. Now, something that was interesting that was that came out very quickly was there was this U-Haul truck that was full of signs and shields and things that after the announcement was made that there going to be pretty much no charges in the case, they pulled up and they were unloading stuff for the people to go, for the protesters at the time to go use. Because of course there hadn't been any rioting done yet, so you have to call them peaceful protesters. Because they're mostly peaceful. Remember, they were up until that point they were totally peaceful. Wink, wink. And this van apparently was rented to a woman who's a member of a group. I can't remember the name of the group. Maybe I'll try and link the story if I remember. But it was, it's by Cassandra Fairbanks, and she just tweeted out the story, like I think within an hour ago of me recording this. And apparently, that woman is from one of these groups that is has a lot of ex-Soros alumni on it. I'm not saying it's all a Soros plot, but because I do think that people, they overstate and understate the role of George Soros, because I think that people don't understand the role of George Soros. George Soros is not an evil mastermind running the world. He is not this unique evil or something like that. George Soros is one of many players. He's one of many billionaires who holds influence, throughout the Western world, and he is a part of, the establishment. George Soros works hand in hand with the U.S. government throughout much of the world, trying to promote Western interests, trying to promote the interests of the U.S. intelligence community. I mean, this is why Soros and his groups are pretty much banned from Eastern Europe, because they don't want Soros promoting riots there and funding people who are going to, start revolutions in Hungary and Russia and all these other places. And so to me, when I see Soros-connected people being involved with these riots and a lot of Soros money, sort of indirectly flowing into these causes, what I see are not, sort of an evil Soros puppet master pulling on these strings and trying to orchestrate, socialist revolution or something like that. What I see are the fingers of the U.S. intelligence community. That's how I interpret stuff like this. And to some of you, that may sound counterintuitive, because gosh, why would the intelligence community and their allies like George Soros have any interest in promoting these pseudo-anarchist type of left-wingers who want to abolish the police? I mean, don't these sound like anti-government extremists? And the answer is no, not really, because what we've been seeing crop up as a solution, and I think Whitney Webb has probably articulated this better than anybody, both the left and the right. What's their solution to all of this unrest? And the more of this unrest, that goes on, what are people talking more and more about? Well, it's the centralization of policing power in the hands of the federal government. You have right-wingers calling on Trump to send in the tanks to break up the riots and to restore order. Similar to how Stalin sent in the tanks to Hungary, and later Khrushchev sent them into Czechoslovakia to restore order after unrest broke out in those provinces of the Soviet Empire. We have a similar thing going, and of course, in both of those cases, what did that lead to? It led to the erosion of the local power of Czechoslovaks and Hungarians over their own, political destiny. And the same thing, I think, could happen here. If successful, if the intelligence community and Soros and those types of people could see a lot of utility in fomenting unrest in this country to provoke not only the right-wingers but also the left-wingers into trying to centralize the police, because what's the mainstream Democrat response to all this unrest? What would they think is probably the best solution? The worse things get, what are they going to start moving towards? Well, of course, it's the same solution that the Republicans have, but with a different justification. Your mainstream Democrats also would like to see the centralization of the policing power in the hands of the federal government, but they want to do it because, they want to end racism. And that's why, focusing on the racism thing is so convenient, because racism is something that, you'll never end. But it's not a concrete thing. And so if you, instead of making things about, cops doing bad things or bad policing tactics like no-knock raids, what you do is you make it about, oh, gee, see, these guys are racist, and so we need to replace them with non-racist jackbooted thugs who will do no-knock raids, because no-knock raids should not be motivated by racism. They should be motivated by, I don't know, something pure and happy. And of course, it's hard to doubt these things when I see the media. Because I'm one of these people who follows, a lot of these cop watch accounts, so-called, on social media, who post every time that there is one of these situations of a body cam footage that comes out, or a report of someone being unfairly killed by the police, someone who is allegedly murdered by the police. And a lot of cases, the media will just never touch those. And usually those are cases that they can't exploit, because of some racial grievance. Either because it's a black cop and a black victim, or a white cop and a white victim, or a black cop and a white victim. If it's not a white cop on black person story, the media doesn't like to touch it, and the reason for that is because all these other ones don't help them add to the whole racism threat narrative that they want to push. And what do we see in the U.S. administrative state, in the State Department, and in all of these government agencies? What sort of ideology do you see spread around? Even recently, after Trump banned critical race theory teaching, in the federal government, it's still getting taught. This wokeism stuff is very popular with the establishment. And so I guess where I'm going with all this is I want people to, when they're looking at this kind of stuff and they see, Soros-aligned group, is funding the riots, don't just look at it as Soros. You have to look at it as something deeper. Soros is just a cog in the wheel. Well, maybe he's a little more than that. Maybe he's, he makes up multiple cogs at the wheel. Metaphor starts to break down there. But Soros is not the whole. He's not the whole enchilada. Soros is an influential person, but he is still a part of a bigger system. Now, quickly, before I close this out, I wanted to try and touch on something that I mentioned, I think, yesterday, and that was the possibility that we are, sort of in another round of rioting like what happened after, the George Floyd killing, at the time of the election. Right now, I think most, as of, yesterday, people would agree we've been in a bit of a lull for a while. Things are pretty much only bad in Portland, and the Kenosha stuff went away, and we've been relatively peaceful in this country. But if we get to the point to where there's some other racial incident, to where you're having riots in a bunch of major U.S. cities, how is that going to affect the election? What are people going to do if on election day, they fear going out to the polls because, there are violent mobs roaming the streets, who's going to do, who knows what to you if you try and go to a polling place. And it might just be that this whole the results of this in this Breonna Taylor case might be the event that jumpstarts the riots going back into the election. And I don't know if it's going to have enough oomph or momentum to carry itself into the election itself. Maybe the Breonna Taylor stuff will all be swept under the rug before then. The news cycle's moving very quickly these days. But I just want to say, we have to keep an eye on that to see if riots do start picking up steam in this country again. That's going to be a very big deal if we're having riots on the day of the election. So, with that said, if you gained anything of value out of this video, I'd appreciate you clicking that like button and sharing this video. And if you haven't already, please do subscribe, because I do upload every day, and I'd hate to have you miss one. So, I'll see you folks back here tomorrow.